Welcome to the question of the day. Today's question is from Andy in Kansas City, and Andy asks, does a process actually work? I've been to a number of trainings over the years, and it's never the same in the field. How much does process actually affect your results? Great question. I get it. I've been there. You go to the training, you get all excited. This is awesome. Like, I can do this. I'm going to do this on every call, right? And then you get back in the field, you run your very first call, and it's nothing like the training. The customer does something completely different than what you experienced in the class. And you're left thinking, what the heck? They never did that in the class. They never showed us how to do that. This doesn't work. That's the easy path. This doesn't work, right? So the quick answer, does a process actually work? Yes, absolutely the process works. If it didn't, you'd have NFL teams that would just say, hey, go deep. Go deep, I'll throw you the ball. Get open, I'll throw you the ball. Right? Like that doesn't typically happen. You have very detailed, specific plays designed. Specific that each person has a job of what they're doing and down to the detail of like where your hands are, where your feet are, where your head is, where your eyes are, how fast you're moving, etc. Like it's very detailed and specific. And the reason it's detailed and specific is because it's proven effective. So I'm going to go over 4 examples today, and then I'm going to close with a big aha moment that explains why it's so different after the training in the field. So number one, my own personal ride along experience in the field. I've ridden along with hundreds, maybe thousands of salespeople in the field. I haven't been counting, but a lot. And the best salespeople have a defined process. Like that's my own take on it. Like as I've been watching, the ones that have a very defined process have results. The ones that don't have a defined process don't have results, right? It's pretty simple to see when you see it a lot. Now, I'm very blessed that I get to ride along with salespeople in the field. Not everybody gets to do that. You're only privy to what you see in the field, in your experience, and maybe sometimes you can ride along with other people at your location, but you don't get those opportunities. But I ride along with hundreds, maybe thousands of people in the field, and I can tell the ones that have a process have results. The ones that don't have results. So there is a little more to it. There's the process, but there's also art, how you deliver that process, your word selection, your phrasing, your tone, your confidence, one step systematically leading into the next step. Your process builds value in the company themselves and the solution. You highlight what makes you better than your competitors. You highlight that today is the best day to buy. And you make it fun. You know, when you make it fun, like this is fun for a customer. It's not painful, right? So like there's a lot more that goes into it than just a process. But my experience, yes, process equals results. But I don't expect you to take my word for it, right? That's just one guy, not really data. That's just what I'm seeing, right? So let's go deeper. So I had one particular sales leader that I worked with, and oh, man, this was one of the toughest company visits I ever had. This company just had the worst culture. It was a horrible culture, no process whatsoever. I literally had salespeople that, as I was trying to work with them, just told me to sit and spin, whistle if it tickled, right? And they would take off, or they just wouldn't show up. And so, and there was no accountability with this either. Like I would talk to the sales leader, and he had no support from upper management. So like he couldn't even hold these guys accountable. They were scared that, well, if we hold them accountable, sales guys will all leave, and then what are we going to do, right? So there's just absolutely no accountability, no process. And the thing that stunk about this was the sales lead. He was a great sales leader, a great salesperson himself. Like he knew this stuff worked. The culture was just so bad. He couldn't get the guys to buy in to attempt this process. And so poor performance followed. The team was very underperforming. And I told the sales leader, as we were sitting having dinner one night, I said, This is what I'm scared of. I'm scared of if we don't fix this culture problem, because this isn't even a sales thing anymore. This is beyond sales. We got to fix the culture before we have any chance of fixing sales here. And I said, if we don't fix this culture, my fear is you're going to burn out because he's busting his butt trying to get this team bought in, trying to get them to like him. He has no support from leadership, so there's no accountability whatsoever. He's going to get burnt out at some point. And that's exactly what happened. He got burnt out. He put in his notice. He said, you know what? I can go a lot of other places and make money, and they appreciate me a lot more than this. I get treated a lot better. And so he quit. He put in his notice. So the company then scrambled and was like, well, this guy's pretty good, we do like this guy, like we don't want him to just up and quit. So they talked him into staying as a salesperson, at least until he found another job. And so he stayed as a salesperson. So now they have no sales manager, just a team of salespeople. You got the one former sales leader who has a very defined process, great attitude. And then you got the rest of the team. Horrible culture, horrible attitude, no process. First month out in the field, he doubled everybody's performance, doubled their closing percentage, doubled their average sale with the same amount or actually less calls in some situations here. Doubled their performance. And I should also add, he did not have a trades background. So, he got a little as a sales leader, but that was like 6 months. Like he never worked in HVAC. He never was a HVAC salesperson before that, but he doubled their performance. So him and I, we jumped on a call at the end of that first month, and I kind of giggled with him, and I said, so you're saying this stuff actually works, huh? Like, because him and I were beating our heads against the wall trying to get everybody else to do it. And all it took was him quitting, getting talked into staying as a salesperson to show him like, yeah, this stuff works. Like if you jokers would just do what I'm doing, you could have these same results, right? So there's another example of process works. He had a very defined process. All right, but if you don't believe me, I got a third example here. So there was a sales team I visited, and they were about to fire their salesperson. They said, we got the salesperson, like he's new. He's been here about 6 months. We sent him to training. We actually think training made him worse, which that kind of floored me. I was like, I never really heard of like training making somebody worse, but they were like, yeah, training made him worse. And his closing rate was down to 27%. I remember the number exactly, 27%. And so I rode along with him, and he was all over the place. I'd never seen anything like it. It's like he remembered everything from the training, but he couldn't put it in a logical order. He was like asking questions about the furnace, and then he would like go into the beginning of a presentation, but then he'd stop and like ask more questions, and then he would ask where the thermostat was. It was like if you took all the pieces of a process, put them into a jar, shook it up, and then just spilled it out. That's what his process was. It was so jumbled. I'd never seen anything like it, right? But all it took was one ride along, and I saw what was happening. It was so bad. It was almost one of the times I jumped in and actually took the call over. When I ride along, I set the expectation. I'm not taking the call over. That's not what I'm there for, right? But this was one time I almost jumped in and took it over because the customer, he was confused. He was getting mad. He was so frustrated because nothing was making sense. And so we had a conversation after that call. Obviously it didn't sell, right? We had a conversation, and we broke that process into those pieces, and we put them in a logical order. And we walked through how one step of the process leads into the next step of the process, leads into the next step of the process. And then we role played that afternoon, right? Like in a coffee shop. We were sitting in a coffee shop doing this in between calls, and we started role playing that process. And it started to come together. Now, I was about to catch my flight out of there, but he was running one more call. My flight was pretty late that night, and I said, hey, let me ride along on this last call with you. So we ran along. I rode along on this last call. And it was a lovely couple, and he worked through the process, and it was so much better. Like it flowed logically. But then he ran into the end, and they said, well, we're just going to think about it. And I thought to myself, you know what? Hey, moral victory here. He put a process together, like that was a logical process. Moral victory here. This was much, much better. But it didn't end there. Customer said, yeah, I think we need to think about it. And he dug into that. He said, if you don't mind me asking, what questions do you have that you're thinking about? And they were price. They were concerned about the price, right? And again, I caught myself thinking like, okay, he did a really good job digging in. He identified the objection, but like, no way he's going to overcome this price objection. Like nobody turns around that quick. I kid you not. Well, the husband and wife were looking at each other. He looked at me and he winked. He winked at me. And I was like, what is going on here? This confidence. He had this confidence all of a sudden. He winked at me. And then he dug into overcoming the price objection. And as he overcome the price objection, he said, can you see how this makes sense for both the company and for you guys? And they go, yeah, I guess that makes sense. And then he asked for the sale on top of it. He said, should we move forward with this solution here? And they looked at each other and they looked back at him and they said, yeah. I about fell out of my chair. I couldn't believe it. Like the confidence that he had and how he put that together because he was following a process. One step led into the next. He went from 27% closing before I got there. He was 72% closing the week after I was there. I'd never seen such a big turnaround. And all I did was put the process together for him. That was it. He had it from there. Winked at me. My goodness. All right. So these are all examples. These are my examples in the field here, but maybe you don't buy into that. You say, Chris, in God we trust. All others bring data. I got data for you. For years, myself, other sales trainers, coaches have said the process equals results. But you're kind of taking us at our word, right? And our examples here, right? Or companies that do it. But now, in the advent of AI, we have data. Like I can prove that. I can point to data, right? Now, I work with a number of AI companies, and these AI companies, they track process and adherence to process and what that does to results like closing and average sale. And looking at the data, combining data from different AI companies and looking at over 100,000 calls. That's a really good sample size. 100,000 calls. You can see a correlation that when adherence to process goes up, closing and average sale also go up. So if we dig into that data, and that data is combined technicians and salespeople. So some of these are much smaller tickets, right? But so take that with a grain of salt here. But when you look at, if you did the math on this, somebody running 2.5 calls a day. That's what I put in. 2.5 calls a day. So 2 to 3 calls a day. 2.5, right? If they're adhering to the process 10%, so basically they're not following the process whatsoever, versus the same salesperson, 2.5 calls a day, adhering to the process 90%, the difference in revenue generated between the 90% person and the 10% person, and that's not closing, that's process adherence. The difference between 10% adherence and 90% adherence at 2.5 calls a day in a month equals $207,000, $207,495. That's exactly what it equals. That's the difference in a month. Now, wherever you're at, you probably fall somewhere in the middle there, right? Like you're not a 10% adherence, but you're maybe not a 90% adherence. You're somewhere in the middle, right? So cut that number in half, $100,000. What's your commission on an extra $100,000? But then take it further. Take it further. If you did that every month, 12 months, that's a difference of $2.4 million. $2.4 million. And again, you're somewhere in the middle, right? So let's call it $1.2 million. What's your commission on another $1.2 million? You're welcome. I just gave you a pay raise. So the answer is yes. Process equals results. So that's 4 reasons process works. If you don't believe me and you want to keep winging it after that, good luck. It's on you, man. I tried. Now I want a secret, right? So what's the secret? Why is it not like training when you get out into the real world? Well, this is the difference between good and great. And this is why it seems not the same as the training. Training is a safe environment. In the real world, people are real. It's actual experiences. And people are people. They're going to do different things, right? It's never going to be as cookie cutter as the training. We can try to make it as real as possible. Real practice equals real results in the field, but we can make it as real as possible, but it's never going to be 100% like in the real world. And so people are going to be people. They're going to do different things. Earlier, I said the NFL, they got specific plays. Even their plays break down. But here's what they do. They practice these plays over and over and over again until it's muscle memory. You cannot get it wrong. They have the timing down perfect. When the quarterback says hut and starts dropping back, the receiver is going out. The receiver is running 10 steps, not 9, not 11, exactly 10 steps, stopping, turning around, and the ball's already there because the quarterback was throwing it before the receiver even turned around. They have the timing and the placement down. But sometimes the receiver will slip on the turf. The receiver will get bumped by a defender, right? And they get out of position. But they know their play so well that they can get back into position because they know where they need to be and when they need to be there. They've practiced it that many times. It's the same thing in our world. When we get pulled out of process, how do we get back into process? An example would be you show up at a home. You know you're supposed to go over a visual agenda to set the expectations with the customer. But we get there and the customer is waving us around the side of the house. They're running to the backyard saying, "Follow me, the air conditioner's back here." What do? Just a good salesperson is going to either skip setting that visual agenda or they're going to try to do it on the fly or something like that. But a great one knows their process so well, they're going to get back into process. So they're going to follow that customer. They're going to chat about the AC. And then before they get too far, they're going to say, "Hey, before we get too far, let me set your expectations of what we're going to do today." And then they go into setting that visual agenda. So they get back into process. That's the secret. That's the difference between good and great. And is a process worth it? I got 2.4 million reasons that say, yes, a process is worth it. That's today's question of the day. If you're enjoying question of the day, follow, share, give a rating. We need those. Question of the day is on major streaming platforms. If you have a question, reach out to me either on social media or email. Both are listed below in the show description. Let's get your questions answered. And if you are a Next Star member, schedule a call with me. Let's address this one-on-one. Let's get into your specific situation. Let's find your $2.4 million. I'm Coach Chris. We'll see you tomorrow.